All right, I'm loading up here. Today, I've got some of you have had some questions about just some technical issues with your mass as far as, basically we've started putting in interior rooms, and we've got these rooms that have walls that are straight up and down, but then we've got curvy or sloping exterior walls that are associated with our mass. And we need to find a way to actually trim these straight walls to the curvy mass or the slanted walls. That's one question. Revit doesn't like joining and trimming those type of situations, so I've got a workaround that will solve that problem. And then I want to get into how we can start working with the exterior facade a little bit more, and then try to address try to introduce some more tools as we go. Any major questions about your assignment so far regarding the rooms and creating groups, that type of thing? Okay. Pretty straightforward stuff, I think. Maybe. So I'm going to load up just the mass where I've been working. We also need to start looking at square footage and trying to figure out where we can start carving out stairwells and also elevators, and kind of your vertical circulation that would occur throughout a tower. And I want to go over how we can do that as well. The first question is that if we've got our mass and I've got walls that are sloping at different angles, and this exterior wall is actually kind of kinked as it goes up. We want to be able to, when we start getting to the end of our, there we go, we get to the view, delete this. So some of you might have a mass and you've inserted your regular walls that are on the interior, and as they start to butt up against the exterior face of the mass, you've probably got some gaps or some kind of transition that needs to happen between the exterior face and then this exterior sloped wall and then your straight wall. The best way to solve this situation is to, first of all, you'd want to ungroup whatever wall is at the exterior. So if you've got a series of groups that happen to be your hotel rooms, when you get to that end unit, at the end or during class last time, I ungrouped this end unit so that the exterior or the end walls can be manipulated in a different way. But if you actually take your wall and drag it out so that it's well beyond the face of your exterior, Revit doesn't like to trim angled walls together, especially in the project mode. So the workaround is that we can apply a wall. I'm going to click on Home, Wall. I'm just going to apply a temporary wall. I'll just call it let's go ahead and do a generic 12-inch. And when you're placing walls, there's an option here that says to pick faces, instead of just drawing the wall straight up and down. And if you have a mass that's already been established in your project, if you choose pick face, I can tab over until I can select the particular face I want, and I can draw kind of this solid wall that would be associated with this mass face that is actually curving and sloping and doing all the things that the mass is doing as well. So when you click on wall, if you need to click on this modify place wall, you'll have this green tab, and that will take you back into the modify commands where you have the draw, the lines, the rectangle, and so on, and you have pick faces over here. You can also do the same command by just choosing, instead of just choosing wall, on the down arrow, if you actually place a wall by face, it's the same command. And also massing, you can also do a model by face. It's all the same command, just kind of in different locations. But there's no way to cut this geometry, and I wish there was. It's on everyone's wish list because everyone's doing a lot more complex modeling in Revit nowadays. And so one of the commands that we can actually work on is editing the profile. I started showing you that in last class. But in order to figure out how to edit that profile and get it so that it's aligned with the wall, we need to figure out where the intersection is. So if I click on this wall and actually then choose join, I'm going to join this wall that's sticking out of the mask and this new wall that we just placed together. What that does is, even though it kind of joined it together, we actually get an intersection line occurring right at that wall, kind of the inside face of this sloping wall. And you'll notice that when I place this mask, or the wall that's on the mask, right now it is projecting inward into the room. And I could change that by selecting this wall. Hold on 1 second. You could select the wall, and then where it says location line, right now it's set to finished face exterior. I could change it to finished face interior, and that will flip the wall moving out. Not that big of a deal for what we're trying to do, but I just want to make sure that I am getting the exterior, the very exterior face of this mask. So now what we can do is actually click on this wall, edit the profile, and now that we have that intersection, we now have a point that we can actually snap to. Or I could just pick this line by using pick lines and hover over until I pick that slanted line. And then I can trim up this profile, make it a closed shape, and it'll give you some warning about, unjoining the elements, and that's fine. And that will trim up that wall, and you can either keep this wall in place and hide it, so I could make a permanent hide. I could say hide in view elements just in case I ever need to bring it back. Or when you're done, trimming all the walls along that whole entire face, you could just click on that wall and delete it. And because you edited the profile, you're able to still keep that shape. So unfortunately, it's a little bit of extra work there for trimming, but luckily you kind of only have to do it on the exterior face and not all throughout.
Where was that edit profile button?
Edit profile is whenever you click on a wall, you'll get the edit mode at the top. And it'll say edit profile.
Can you go real quick again how you had that wall on the side of that curve, or the wall you created?
The one that's actually following the mask?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just like in the floor assemblies, when we created our mask floors and then we applied a floor to that, we can also go to wall, and you can click on wall by face and choose a particular wall in your drop down menu, and then you're basically picking a face, and I tabbed over till I found the particular face I wanted to select. And you'll notice that even though I went through a different method this time, I did home, drop down menu of the wall by face, you see that this draw command, pick faces, is also highlighted, so it's picking the same exact tool. And then I just clicked on that. So I'm gonna.
And how did you split that again? You just go and have to go through.
Yeah. So by picking that wall, first thing I wanted to do is also make sure that my temporary wall that I've picked is actually, moving outward instead of inward, so that I can really get that face and be able to snap to it. And the way I changed that was when you select that wall that was placed under location line under properties, it says finished face exterior. I can place it by finished face interior, and it moves that wall out. Then all I did was click on modify, join, geometry, and then I clicked on both of these, and that basically makes a join mark there. And now that there's a line, when I click on this wall that's extending out. And this is why you want your wall to extend well past your mask face or your exterior face, because then when you click on Edit Profile, you should be able to see might turn on my wireframe mode this time. So you can see the cut lines that have occurred. When I click on this and say Edit Profile, this time it's not allowing me to select that line. Right. Let me try to join that again. Okay, now I've got it. I can actually select. And then you can pick lines. I'm going to rotate around here. You should be able to pick that line. And
What did
edit.
you do to make that line actually show up? Because mine is not showing up.
So what I did is I click, if you click on your wall right now that's sticking out, make sure the reset profile isn't highlighted. Is that highlighted for some reason?
Nope. Yes.
If it is highlighted and you want to retrim your wall, go ahead and click reset profile so your wall goes back to its original setting. Then all I did was click on join geometry. I clicked on the wall extending out first and then the slanted wall. And then if I click on edit profile, I should be able to, you should be able to see be able to at least hover over them and select the slanted line. If not, you might have to kind of play with that wall a little bit more by extending it out further, or move it around a little bit, change its parameters, just to trick Revit into maybe liking it again. It's not the best method, but it's the only method that currently works. You would think that, I'm going to undo this again. And you may have to unjoin the geometry, Brian, to kind of reset it again as well, just in case for some reason it thinks it's joined.
Will the cut command work?
You would think so. I clicked on this and I was playing around with this all day long. So it says cut, it says first pick the element to be cut or host wall. So this is the host wall. If I click on that, it doesn't allow me, once I click on something, it doesn't allow me to cut or select anything else. So I don't know like what it's doing there. I was thinking I could also select this part. So I've never really had good luck with this cut command. I'm not sure. And actually when you view the video, that undercut, what it's showing you in this video is actually showing you that if you had a void that you cut out of a mask, and for some reason that void, you know how when we worked with voids before, sometimes that void worked and sometimes it didn't? That's basically what this cut command does, is it allows you to rehost that void and basically cut out a void element from a mask. So I think that's really its extent of what this cut geometry tool can actually do. So they need to really upgrade that a little bit. Again, the masking tools and everything that we're really experimenting with in this class are not well developed, I guess you could say. So there are going to be instances where you have these workarounds to deal with. I'm going to delete this wall and let's talk about how we can actually start to figure out how many stairs you're going to need in your hotel. Everyone should kind of know that you at least need 2 stairs, 2 stairwells by code. But really the code is determined by how many people occupy a floor And that is not necessarily, how many rooms you have and that you're only going to have 2 people in each room. And I'm not going to get into the, let's go look up in the IBC, the International Building Code, all the tables and everything that you've had to do in other classes. Basically, what we want to do is first find out how much area we have on each floor and come up with a method to calculate how many people could be on a floor at one time, assuming that this is just a hotel and by code a hotel floor is considered an R2 occupancy, it's residence, and you would be calculating your floor area per person 200 gross, meaning 200 square feet per person. So because we're also going to have lobby spaces and other, you could have conference rooms or meeting rooms, if you were to have those rooms on a floor, those would actually be assembly occupancies and you'd have a lot greater people on that floor. So I'm actually just going to come up with a simple, quick calculation just for now since we're in the design phase that says each floor will be 100 gross, and that's kind of 100 square feet per person. We could be more conservative and do 50 or whatever, but what I'm going to do is you should have a mass floor schedule, correct? If you have a mass floor schedule in your project, I'm going to delete my fields that I've already created here so we can start over. You might have a mass floor schedule that looks like this, or I had other ways of sorting it, but essentially you might have level 1 and you've got maybe a series of level, because I've got 3 different masses, so I've got 3 level 1s and then a square footage. I've got 1 level 3, 2 level 4s. You probably have multiple levels because of how you built your mass element. And first of all, what we want to do is calculate a total for each of the levels and not really itemize every single instance. So what I'm going to do is click on sorting, and if we sorted by level so that we get this level 1 through whatever your last level is, if you just make sure that you uncheck itemize every instance, what that will do is every time level 1 shows up, it's going to compress it into one line item instead of making it repeat over and over again, because that does kind of get a little bit redundant in this particular schedule. So under sorting and grouping, uncheck itemize every instance. You should have grand totals checked and maybe titles in total. If you have any headers or footers, just uncheck those because we don't need those at the moment. And then what we want is to also make sure that our floor area is selected to calculate totals under formatting. So when I click OK, my schedule will compress and only show level 1 one time, level 3 one time, and so on and so forth. But you should see that your floor area now jumped up because it calculated the total out of all those other instances that used to be in the schedule.
Whenever I did that, it compressed all my levels into one total square footage.
I did also.
Do you have a sort by level under sorting and grouping? How are you sorting your... Sort by level. If you don't have anything here for sorting, it's going to compress everything into nothing because it doesn't know what to sort and group by. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to add in 2 fields real quick. So let's click on fields, and I'm going to add a parameter. There's a little button here. Because I'm not going to have the particular available fields to the left, I can now create my own field. And I'm going to add a parameter called occupant load by area. You can call it whatever you want, but that's what is referenced in the code. And I'm going to change my type of parameter to, let's just do a number or an integer. We do integer so we don't have to worry about decimals and all that kind of stuff. And we'll go ahead and click OK. And now the only issue here is that since we're saying that each floor is going to be 100 gross, so 100 square feet per person, I need to go into each of these floor levels This isn't like Excel where I could just create like one field and have it reference the one field. Unfortunately, I have to go down the list and type in 100 each time. So hopefully you don't have 110 floors. But you'd have to do this anyway if you got more specific with the code and you started breaking down each floor area by saying that, you know, some parts of the floor are actually 100 square feet, others are 50, depending on what the code has you break it out by. And you do have to do that in, you know, kind of a typical building. Just sit there and break out each space individually. But we're just going to do this kind of as a global way. Next thing we're going to do is create a calculated field. So once we've done that, we've got our occupant load by area. We now have a parameter that we can reference. I'm going to click under fields and then click under calculated value. Anytime I want to make a calculated value, kind of like a formula like we did in the family environment, we can now create this formula calculated value. I'm going to call this, let's just call it occupants. We can also make this an integer. And then we've got a formula down here that we need to type in our exact parameters to make a, basically what we need is floor area divided by occupant load by area. But instead of typing all that out, there's this little button over here. I kind of wish they had this on the family environment side. But there's this button that brings up a pop-up window for you to select your parameters that are already available. So I can click under floor area, and that'll pop that in there, and then space divided by, click on this button again, and then occupant load by area, and click OK, and you'll get this. By the way, you got inconsistent units. Well, we know how to solve that problem. The problem is we're dividing a square footage by an integer, and for some reason Revit doesn't like that, so floor area in parentheses, and take floor area within the parentheses and divide that by 1. That somehow drops the units and Revit's happy again. Now we can click OK, and you'll see that some of your fields might have populated and others did not. That is because you need to go back under formatting and make sure that this calculated field also has the checkbox calculate totals. And then all of a sudden you have all of your totals established.
Is it under occupant?
Occupants. Formatting. Make sure you click under formatting and then occupants and then checkbox calculate totals. Now this scheduling that we've been doing on a couple instances, this is something you're going to do on a constant basis when you're doing construction documents. You got to do a door schedule, you got to do window schedules, you have to do just what we're doing here, occupant load schedules. You're going to have to do, you know, someone might actually come out and say, well, I want you to add up all the square footage of drywall that we have on this project so we can do a cost estimate. This is the method of finding out and extracting all that information so that we can itemize instances of all of our different products that are in a project. So learning the sorting and the fields and all these, we haven't gone over filters yet, or we did briefly, but not into detail. We really have to understand how this is operating so that at any moment we can sort this database and extract this information as needed. Can't wait till you have, you know, 1,000 doors that you have to spec hardware for and enter into a door schedule. It's a fun day.
You'll have to do that anyway.
Huh?
You'll have to do that anyway.
One day. Okay, so basically what this does is it shows you that you have occupants, and does anyone have an occupant field or value for a particular level greater than 500 people? You can kind of look at your list real quick. Probably not, because we're using a 100 square foot value at the moment. If your floor area at one instance had a more than 500 people exiting off of that floor, that's when you would need 3 exits. This is all in the code. I'm not going to point to it. I'll show you guys how to look it up, but you'll have to look it up one day. So we all can assume that we can actually just do 2 egress stairs, but there's a little special section under the code that also, after you've done this calculation, it says, oh, I only need 2 stairs. You go into another part of the section of the code that says, oh, there's special provisions for high rises. High rises say you need to provide an extra stair. So we're going to need 3 stairs. Anyway, kind of makes sense, I guess. But we can at least see that we're not going to need more than 3. We can just assume we're going to need 3 somewhere in our model. So that's a quick exercise to kind of figure out what we need. And you basically need 3 stairs for the whole entire, floor. Let's say you have one, I've got 3 masses that has 1 floor slab going all the way through the masses. And then when you get up a little bit taller, you can see this tower that's going up a little bit higher. I'm obviously not going to need 3 stairs for this little part. I could assume that I just need 2 means of egress, coming out of that location. So don't go too wild with, adding in stairs everywhere. But what you want to do is you'd probably look at a site plan, and this is where I'll get to Wynn's question here. Wynn doesn't have a site plan anymore, somehow. Delete. But if you have a site plan, the purpose of this would be to look at your whole entire building and see where all of your masses are. Even though your mass floors are twisting and turning, you can kind of start to see a location of where you might start to locate a stair so that it actually meets and hits all the different floors. Same thing with elevators. You'd probably find kind of some central location of where you might put your elevator shaft that we're going to have to add. And this will kind of give you that idea of placement of where these items could be. If you don't have a site plan, maybe it got deleted. If you have the site plan is a default that actually comes with Revit, and there's no way to just go into a view and click on plan views, and they don't have that option. When, since you don't have a site plan, click under view, plan views and floor plan, and see if it gives you an option to select one. I guess I could delete my site plan. So I'm gonna delete
this file. It's a different file I was working with.
Okay.
I lost all the plans.
Okay. Well, you should be able to get as long as you have all the levels. So you might have deleted the datum lines.
Yeah, I did.
So if you delete the data lines, that's why your views went away.
Right.
So you never want to do that.
I just.
But if you keep your data lines or add them back.
I just wondered how to get them back.
Yeah, if you want to get them back, if you add more data lines, you're going to have to redraw them, and then your views will come back. Or if your datum lines are still there, but you happen to delete the floor plans, and your datum lines went back to like a black target instead of the blue. So for instance, if I went into, let me go into an elevation. Let's say that level 10, I just come in here, I delete this from the project browser. This turns to black instead of blue because it's no longer linked to the project browser. If I want that to come back, I can click under View, Plan Views, and then make a floor plan, and it should give me the option to select whichever ones haven't been made into a floor plan yet. And then you hit OK, and that'll bring you back to making that blue again.
So if you don't have any and you want to set, you want to make a new one at like the 0 plane, like how do you select the 0 plane?
You just draw.
When
you
you
can
go in to set up a datum.
Yeah, you
create
just
a level. Like how do you select the 0 plane?
just draw a level somewhere, and then when you zoom in, just change that to 0. Because it's always going to reference where 0 is and the exact height from the Revit model, the base. So anyway, I don't have a site plan. I deleted it, and if we need to get that back, all the site plan really is, and I'm going to look here one more time here. I'm not able to select and make a site plan. So the default site plan that comes with Revit is essentially the level 1. If you go to your project browser, right click on it, and tell it to duplicate the view. When you duplicate it, you'll get copy of level 1 shown. We could rename this to be site. Then all the site plan is, it was referencing or started referencing from level 1, and we can click on view range and just make sure everything except the cut plane is set to unlimited, and then change your cut plane to be something like 2,000 feet, something well above level 1, so that we can see you're basically looking down on the top of your building. That's all that's really that whole entire site plan is actually doing. All right, so we know that we have to add in some stairs and elevators and things like that. One thing that we need to do is start creating shafts that go through our project. And instead of going back into the massing mode and then creating a void and going through all that trouble, we don't really need to do that anymore. As long as we have real floors now, these real floor plates set up, we can go into, I'll just go into a site plan, and under home, there is a whole tab here that has to do with cutting openings into any product or any component of Revit. So any kind of face, any kind of shaft, any wall, any vertical, and then of course if you had roofs, you could make dormers. The difference here is the following. Let's say I want to make a vertical opening. So I'm going to click on vertical opening over here. And let's say what that does is it allows you to pick a floor. So I'm going to pick one floor slab. Once I do that, I go into a sketch mode. I can then draw what shape my void is actually going to be. And I can click OK. I'll look at this and you probably don't want to be in a site plan when you do that. You probably want to do this level by level. And I'm going to tell you this isn't the way to do this. I'm just quickly making an example. If I create this vertical opening, it wants me to select the floor plate that I'm on, and then if I go up to level 8, I can see this other floor plate below where I made that opening. I'll click on vertical again, and let's say I pick the next floor slab up. Maybe I need to be on level 9. I have to do that floor by floor by floor, and if I look at where I was actually making this, on this side, you can see that I'm starting to cut an opening on each floor. The problem with that method is, what if the size of your shaft changes? Because it will, because you're going to figure out that eventually your stairwell that you planned isn't big enough to, once we actually start drawing stairs, to fit all the stairs in there that we need. Or your elevator manufacturer is going to come to you, or you're going to look at the data, and you're going to say that they're going to tell you that your elevator shaft isn't big enough. So if you have to make a change, you're going to have to go back to each individual floor and hit edit and change that boundary that we just created. So instead of doing that, I'm just going to undo all of this. Let's just go ahead and I'll click on level 16 for now. You want to actually create a shaft opening. Creating a shaft opening takes you directly into sketch mode, and you just draw exactly where you need this opening to be. To the left, you'll have a set of properties. It has a base constraint set to level 1, and then a top constraint set to unconnected. Well, this is saying that at the moment, our shaft goes 1 foot below the base constraint, and it's unconnected to 20 foot high. You might just say, well, I needed to go through all my floors, so why not just pick level 41, and then also make a top offset of 1 foot, so I make sure it goes through the top floor. And then I can hit exit. And now when I look at my 3D view, I now have this void cutting through all of my floor plates in a consistent manner all the way up. And if I ever have to change my opening later on, I only have to do it one time. So this is where you would start to carve out on your floor plan where you're going to have a central core for your elevator, and then where you might start to have a couple different stairwells to figure out the length and width of this particular opening. You might just carve out some space at the moment. It doesn't have to be a rectangle. You can also extend this. Let's say I move this sketch so that it's beyond all of the floors, and I click exit. I don't have to worry about the sloping wall. As long as I went well beyond the exterior face with my sketch, it's going to obviously stop at where the building edge ends. You guys understand that? What's the questions?
What did you do to the constraints?
When I select my opening, let's see. There you go. You can hover over and you can eventually tab over. You might need tab. When you select your shaft opening, the constraints were the base constraint was set to level 1, assuming I wanted it to go all the way to level 1. Top constraint, I just chose my top floor. Even though my top floor in this part of my building happens to actually not coincide with where I'm cutting this. You can see my top floor is way up here. I can still make a top constraint go up to level 41. And if you don't have these options, it's because, again, the datums, if you don't have those datum lines selected, you're not able to implement that. And then I just made top offset 1 foot and base offset -1 foot, so you make sure the shaft opening goes through it. Or you could select your vertical shaft by tabbing over it, and you get these drag handles that you can also just manipulate and drag the top of your shaft up and down.
What if the shaft doesn't show up when you draw it? When you first draw it?
What do you mean it doesn't show up?
Okay, hit the check mark
Okay?
and it goes away.
Because look down, look into your 3D view. By default, if you didn't set anything, it only went up 20 feet. So go all the way down to your first floor, and you have it selected right there. You can see it in blue with the drag handles. So now if you look to the left, yeah, you can move that up and start to manipulate it from there. So that's how you would start to just carve out some sections of where your stairs are going to be located. You just want to carve out an opening. It doesn't have to be an exact opening, but you might figure out real quick how much room you need for a stairwell. And I'm not going to go into all the specifics of how to make a stair right now, but the easiest way to figure out how big your stair needs to be so that you can size your shaft correctly is click on, let's go into a floor plan view like level 11, doesn't matter where you're at. Under Home, click under Stairs, and remember we did draw a stair a long time ago with the bridge and it didn't quite work out with our bridge. It'll work out a little bit better now that we're actually doing a building. Now that we have datum lines to go to from level 1 to level 2 or whatever the different levels are, if I'm on a particular level like level 11, my base level is set to level 11, and by default it assumes you want the stair to go up to the next level. So the top level is set to level 12 on my example. I'm just going to draw a width. I'm going to change the width of my stair. It says default is 3 feet. Don't know why they do that, because in the code your minimum width is 44 inches. So you might as well just say 48 inches. And of course your size of your stairs are sized by the amount of people going down them. I'm not going to get into all that, but let's just say 4 feet is a good number. And then we can use the run. If you're in the create stairs sketch, start drawing a run of stairs, and as I start to draw them, it'll say 13 risers created, 15 remaining. I might go up until I get an equal, like 13 risers created and 13 remaining, and click, and then come over a little bit further, and then draw another set of stairs, and it creates a landing for you. Once you've done that, you can select this and kind of move it in, give it some dimension, probably minimum dimension you want is like 6 inches between. Now notice I drew this dimension, and remember from time to time you can actually click on that dimension to change the value of it. When I select all of the run of stairs and the treads that are associated with this stair, notice I can't do anything with this dimension because I've selected multiple items. If you click on, normally when you select a lot of items that have a dimension set to it, you should have a button that appears that indicates activate dimensions. If I click on that, all of a sudden I can activate this dimension and change this to be 6 inches. Or I could change it to be 8 inches, whatever I want. Then I can exit out, and you can now see that that's the size of your stair, and don't forget you would have a piece of a floor over here, so you could probably assume 5 feet out from the top of this stair. That would give you, so if I draw an annotation line and then move this 5 feet away, you can see that your shaft opening that you need to create should be something like 20 foot 2 inches by 9 feet minimum. And so that's how you can start to carve out your space all the way through your building.
Can you show again how you did the 6 inches between the stairs?
Yes. So if I'm in my sketch mode, so I haven't closed out of my stair yet, all I did was strike a dimension string between those two green lines on the interior. And then if you window over one whole stair run, so you're selecting all the green lines and the black lines, and there's like a blue line in there as well. There's a little button that should show up to the top left where it says multi-select in your options bar. Click on activate dimensions, and then you're able to select that dimension and change it to, I could make it 1 foot. So instead of figuring out the exact design of your stair at the moment, you could at least do that quick exercise, and that's how many stairs you're going to need from floor to floor in order to make this stair actually work from your different levels. And mine's floating in space because I actually don't have a floor right here. So I would actually, once you actually create a stair, and always delete these darn guardrails that pop up, because no one ever makes vertical picket guardrails anymore. I mean, you see them, but I'd hope you guys would design something better. So I always delete that and just get my stair run. But if you select a stair, you can also pick that instead of just going from level 11 to level 12, there's an option called multi-story top level. If you change that from none and go ahead and select something greater than level 12, that stair will copy all the way up to whatever your top constraint was. Then you don't have to model this over and over again. You just do that one time and you're done. Click on your stair. You should have a single stair element. Click under to the left under your properties. Instead of your base level constraint, like maybe I'll actually make this go down to level 1 and level 2. There's an option here called multi-story top level. It's set to none. Just change that to something higher than the other level, and it's going to copy your stair from the base constraint multi-level all the way up to whatever that top constraint was. So I don't know about you, if you've modeled stairs in Rhino and then modeled stairs in SketchUp and all that kind of stuff, especially if you're doing a skyscraper, that seems pretty easy. You just need to do it on one level and then copy it everywhere. One click of a button. What's the question?
Yeah, it says the multi-story stair ramp could not reach the top level with integral number of flights.
What you have to make sure that, okay, your stairs are only gonna, what's the error message again?
it couldn't reach its top level with integral.
Did you draw your stair to make sure that you had no risers left in the sketch mode? Look at your stair properties, and to the left, make sure your desired number of risers it's equal to 26.
Yes,
What's your actual number of risers say?
26,
26 and 26?
yeah.
Are all your floors equal? Or are some of your levels different? Because remember, you're making a stair, so it can only, if you're going to do a multi-level stair, it has to be connecting floors that are equal all the way up.
They are equal,
They're all 14, what's your floor-to-floor heights?
15.
All of them are 15?
Yeah.
Okay, well let's look at that after class. Try to pick another level and see if it works. Okay, let's start talking about the exterior facade a little bit. You guys should be experts. I like my stair, how it's floating out into space there. Just take off multi-story and I'll just put it down there or delete it for now. We all should be experts on how to deal with mass surfaces, right? We've done curtain panels, but there are some other options now that we're in the project environment that we can start to work on how to deal with curtain walls, how to deal with curtain panel systems, and then also how to deal with our favorite curtain panel pattern-based systems. Those are the three options of how we can begin to design our exterior facade. The first method would be if you have a wall that is straight somewhere, and I think I have one, we can place a curtain wall by clicking on Home, choose Wall, and under Properties, scroll all the way down, and you should see, remember, we've just got our basic walls that we've worked with so far. You have other options down here called curtain wall and storefront. You can create a storefront system or a curtain wall system. The difference in real life is that a curtain wall system, and I'm just going to give you some facts here, and then I'm going to tell you how Revit works, so everyone pay attention. Curtain walls are window systems that are hung from above, right? They're supported from the top and they kind of float at the bottom, and they move with deflection, and they're usually bigger mullions, so you have like a 2-inch wide mullion by, might be 7 inches deep. A storefront system is usually attached at the jambs and is usually can only go up 15 feet or so. Once you go above a certain height, you have to go to a curtain wall system. A storefront system usually has smaller mullions, so you might have a 2-inch wide mullion, but maybe the depth of the mullion is only 4.5 inches. It can go up to maybe 6 inches, depending on the height. Revit treats curtain wall and storefront systems in a different way. Storefront systems in Revit gives you a equal spacing of grids. Okay, it gives you these options to say, you know what, I want, no matter how big my wall is, I want 5 equal spaces, and I get this nice grid of 5 equal spaces in the horizontal, and I could change to the vertical and make it 8 equal spaces. Everything gets pinned, everything gets locked and is determined by those parameters, and you don't have a lot of flexibility in changing the design because you're just going to assume you're going to have a grid system. Curtain wall basically draws a sheet of glass, and then you divide it up however you would like it, and then apply mullions to it. So the curtain wall gives you more flexibility in actually designing a system that you could actually, call it architecture and go with a design. So I'm going to always suggest using curtain wall. And first of all, I'm just going to draw this without worrying about our hotel at the moment. I'm going to draw it off to the side. If we pick wall, and we've got curtain wall, just go ahead and draw a line. Doesn't matter how big it is. And when you zoom in, you should see that you've got just a sheet of glass that's 1 inch thick. I'm going to take an elevation view of this sheet of glass, because in order to work on your curtain wall, you have to be able to look at it in elevation to divide it up. This is what I would call kind of temporary views that you would set up from time to time just to look at particular objects so that you can actually model it. We can click on View and then Elevation, and when you start to hover over the screen and you get close to your wall, you'll see that your elevation view or arrow starts to point directly towards whatever you're trying to take an elevation of. I'll just click on it, and then you can double click on the arrow, and we're going to have to hide this site. And we're going to have to zoom in where it's located. And if I were you, because there's so many things that will occur in your model from time to time, especially if you're doing a very complex model and you've got tons of walls and rooms that are showing up in this elevation, click on your glass and your temporary view settings, choose isolate element. That will only show that one element that you selected. Next thing I'm going to do before we continue is, right now you're in a hidden line mode in this view, hidden line graphic display. And all I see is an outlined border, and then I see white and white. I like to differentiate between my glass when I'm looking at this in elevation so that I know what's the glass versus the wall versus the mullion that we're going to draw. So before we continue, just go under Manage, Materials, and find glass. Should be under G for glass. And I'm going to change my surface pattern, because remember, surface patterns are hatch patterns that you can see whenever you're looking at it in elevation. Right now it's set to none.
Weren't you going to manage it? Did you select the...
Manage at the top, and then Materials. And then I'm going to select Solid Fill and change my color to a very light gray. You could change it to red or pink or whatever you want, but I'm going to choose light gray. And hit OK, and then OK, out of all this. And now whenever I look at something that's on our drawings, it's quick and easy to distinguish what's glass and what isn't. This has kind of become a little bit of a standard with Revit drawings these days. I'm going to also just kind of make this a big piece of glass, so I just selected it and moved the drag handles. Now we can divide this up however we want and start applying mullions to it. Under Home, there are, towards the middle left, you have Curtain Grid and Mullion, and also Curtain System. Curtain systems are systems that you apply to a non-conventional form, kind of like all of our hotels are probably curvy and angled in some shape. Curtain grids are used for, especially if this was like, let's say on the interior side, you might have an interior atrium or something that you start to apply straight walls, and then we can have mullions and add doors and all that kind of stuff into it. Click on your curtain grid, and when you hover over the boundaries of your curtain wall glass, you'll see this dashed line either turn horizontal or vertical. That is the curtain grid that you can place. You can start placing these different grids and come up with some kind of glass design that you would like to see. Now again, this is only going to be a straight up and down situation. If you want things at 45-degree angles and all that kind of stuff, you have to go into a curtain system or a different tool. Once you do that, you can always click on any of these grid lines once they're placed, and you get the temporary dimensions that show up. And if you really want to know or set the dimensions so that you know that this piece of glass needs to be 5 feet wide, you can start to, you always select the grid that you want to move. And kind of slide this back and forth to whatever dimensions you need this to be. This would be a way to design your wall if it happens to be straight all the way up. And when you're done dividing it up into little pieces, just click under mullion, and you can add a mullion at each grid line one at a time. So I can click on it. And notice that I get this white line now because I'm actually adding a mullion and actually breaking this up to be something more real. Or you could save yourself some time and just click on all grid lines and hover over, and there you go, you've created mullions everywhere to look at. If I look at this in 3D, and I've got an actual grid system, and of course I wasn't paying attention to my spaces of my glass. Obviously I'm not going to have this huge pane of glass that was something like 27 feet. So I'd probably divide this up a little bit more and come up with a design. Now once you've applied all these mullions and you want to change, let's say you decide later on that you want this to change, if you tab over, I'm in a 3D view, or if you're in an elevation view, if you want to move that mullion, you have to tab over until you select that grid line again, and you have to actually just move the grid line and the mullion will move with it. So that mullion is always hosted to the grid line, and if you ever want to, see if I just click on this one mullion and then try to move it, it's not going to do anything. So tab over a couple times until you get that dashed line, and then somewhere you'll get your temporary dimension where you can move it, or you could also use your move command as well. The other part to this is you don't always have to have a mullion continuous, most likely in the vertical you do, but let's say your horizontals, let's say that you don't want this mullion to actually show up here, but you want the mullion to be on either side. You can select the grid line, so I'm going to tab over, and when I select the grid line, you'll get this additional tool up here that says add or remove segments. I can click on that and then start selecting a particular segment to remove a mullion from. I can also, so you can sit there and play with the design a little bit more by chopping it up. You can have mullions not continuous all the way across your grid system. But I could also tab over and look down at the lower left. As you tab over, it's going to show you what you're selecting. So first thing is curtain wall mullion. If I tab again, it says wall, curtain wall. Next time it says curtain wall grid. The next time it says curtain panel. If I select the curtain panel, I now have curtain panel options that I can select from a drop-down menu. And by default, there's only two panels. There's glazed, and then there's like an empty panel. So I could actually remove a panel and actually make just kind of a big opening here. Or, I'll undo that. I can tab over till I select my glass again. And this time I'll edit the type, and right now it says that this is a glazed system panel. This is just something that was already preset in Revit. It came with the project setup. I'm going to go ahead and keep my glazed option. There is a solid option in here. How come it didn't show up? Oh, I have to scroll down, sorry. If you scroll down, you also have a solid option, and there you go, you get a solid panel. But you could also change the material of what that So right now this is system panel solid, and right now it's just set to a material that is just set to default. I could change this to something like, well, you wouldn't do this, but masonry concrete units, and hit OK and exit out, and all of a sudden you have block shown in there. So you could come up with another material like metal, like a metal panel, that actually gets put into there and has some other render characteristics plus some other color that might show up in your view. So there's actually a lot of options with your curtain grid, but that helps us on the interior, but not so much with our exterior design, because we've mastered the curving form and the slanted form using our masses. We want to be able to, I'm going to just delete that. We want to be able to apply a system to our curving form, and we can do this in two ways. One would be to go under massing and site, and when we click on our mass, go and edit in place that particular mass. And once we do that, we get our familiar options again to divide the surface. So I could divide this surface up. And then, we all know how to do this, I'm not going to go into it, but you can then make a curtain panel pattern-based system like you did for your bridge. You know, that has these apertures that change, and you set all those parameters to have all those variations that we created. Of course, being on a more simple surface, you might not get that deflection values that we were looking for. But you can come up with some other parameters that you could change for your curtain panels. And then within this mode, you know, you can see over here, you can apply, if you had a pattern-based system loaded in, you could go ahead and apply it here. So I could even come down here and do like a triangle system, and quickly and easily come up with a way to clad the exterior of my design. Instead of doing a fixed layout, you might change the number of the divisions of a U grid and V grid. You might actually, now that we're modeling something that's a little more precise, you might give it a fixed distance between the grid. And if you knew your floor-to-floor heights, let's say you always want the horizontal line to align with a floor line, you could just give it a distance and say, you know, if I've got 14'8" and do this with my other side, let me just see what's going on here. And you'll see that it divided it, and even though I did it 14'8", so it should be equal, I'm not able to get it on the floor line. See, it kind of did something by itself. So what you want to do at this point is in the middle, whenever you can select your system, and this is something we didn't really get into with the bridge component, is there's this little icon in the middle once you select it that allows you to configure the UV grid layout. If you left click on that, it basically gives you just kind of this horizontal, gives you a distance, and then let's see, I can click on, then somewhere on the other side here, you should have a vertical. I'm not going to worry about the vertical, but if I want to align this side, I could just drag these arrows. So it actually wants you to give it a dimension. So maybe I type in 3 foot. Oh, that's changing the fixed distance value. Let me go back. So somewhere, so I can change the rotation. So for some reason, when I was doing a fixed number, let me go back to fixed number, and I configure my grid. I'm still doing that. Let me change my, let me do this one. Fixed distance, 15'8". And right now my justification is from the center. Let me change that to beginning. And then I can offset. Now I should have the ability to offset it. Let me click on my configuration. Let me offset. So I can, maybe I have to figure out this dimension here. Let me type in 3 foot. So I'd have to somehow figure out this offset, or maybe I can click on a line. There we go. There we go, all right. So what I did there is change the justification, and I'm going to change this back to just a simple rectangle for now. I've got my U-grid layout as a fixed distance of 14 foot 8 inches, and by default it centered it, basically dividing from the center point, equal across, or from counting 14 foot 8. If I change my justification of that U-grid to the beginning, and then I can use my align tool, and I pick the floor plate, and then I can choose the grid, and they're aligned to the floor. And if I wanted to, I could lock it so that if my floor, that particular floor ever moved, I now have my grid lines hitting at every floor line. And that should have also changed the offset. Let's see if that changed anything. So it didn't really change any of those figures there like I thought it would. So anyway, you would be able to then apply your actual curtain panel that we've already worked on before. Or we could exit out of this mode, and instead of being in our mass, oh sorry, one last thing. While you're in your mass, edit mode, if you tab over your mass, we can add an edge or a profile. If you add, I'm actually going to add an edge. Adding an edge basically puts a section line somewhere on your mass. That will split your mass into 2 parts. You can see when I tab, I can now select one face. So I could divide that part of the surface up in one direction or one method. And I could select this other part of the face and give it its own divisions and start dividing up your facade in that manner as well. Give you a little more options. Of course, you have to have a curtain panel associated with all the different patterns that you set up. Another method for working with the exterior would be, since you have a curtain component, if you try to apply a curtain grid to a curving face, or slanted or whatever, click on wall, curtain wall, and then I apply and pick face, it's going to yell at you and say, well, we can't make a curtain wall because this tool needs to be something that's straight up and down. So it's not going to like it, and it's going to make you delete the element, or you obviously just cancel. So if you use a curtain system, you can select a face, and when you're done, create the system. It might take a moment here. This will create a bunch of grid lines associated with your form. And if you tab over this system so that you select the whole entire thing, you can see that you have a couple settings here that talk about the number of grid patterns and justification, and kind of similar to the curtain panel assemblies. It's just you don't have the ability to select curtain panel pattern-based elements. So by default, it has a 5-foot by 10-foot system. You can click on Edit Type, and you can see here where you can change the grid 1 pattern and the grid 2 pattern and change the spacing around. And when you're done and you get the configuration that you want, you can just select or go to Home, Create Mullion, and then choose all grid lines, and then it'll create grid line or mullions on this whole entire system. And it might take a moment because it's trying to place a mullion on every single grid line. So to be honest, the curtain panel pattern-based systems that we've already developed, of course they don't have to be as complex as we tried to do with our bridges. As long as you have kind of a solid frame around the exterior, and you're going to want to make sure in your curtain panel pattern-based form, you also have glass in there, because you're going to need a glass component. You could divide up your mass and then apply that curtain panel all throughout your facade system. Any questions on that? We'll get into windows, actually placing, let's say if you don't always have to have glass everywhere. You could have a solid wall and actually start to place windows. That's where our adaptive component comes in, because Revit likes to place windows, but it likes to place windows in straight walls. I'm going to show you an example real quick, and then I'll let you guys go because I know it's getting late here. All I have to do, I'm going to place a solid wall. I'll do a generic 12-inch, placing it by face. Let me pick something that's actually slanting somewhere. So I've got this solid wall that I just created. And I also change it so that finished space exterior, I'll do finished space interior so it pops out. Now if I start to place a window, if I just throw in a window, it wants to keep the window straight up and down. And at some moments, for instance, in another mass type I had, or another wall, see this one that's slanting right here, if I place in a window that's straight up and down, do a big one, bigger one. You can see how it's sticking out of the wall and it doesn't slant with the wall. Revit doesn't know how to handle that because normally you try to put in a window straight anyway. We can later talk about on Tuesday, we could make a opening cut and then place an adaptive component in there that actually what is your window that can slant to, let's say, selecting the midpoint of this frame or even the exterior. For Tuesday, what I want you guys to do, you guys have been developing maybe one room type, right? And you created a group. Remember, look in the program, there's two room types. There's your guest bedroom or hotel unit that's supposed to be 450 square feet. There's another one that's a townhome unit or timeshare that's a little bit bigger, and you'd imagine those would have extended stay people that would probably stay for weeks or weeks at a time at this hotel. So you might have more spaces, a couple bedrooms, maybe a living room, maybe a kitchen in there, something for them to do some cooking or whatever. You might want to develop your second room type if you haven't already. And then I want you to start placing exactly how you're going to get 50 guest bedrooms and 50 townhome share units along your floor plates. Start to place those everywhere so that eventually you'll have some leftover space that we can start to develop atrium spaces. And remember to carve out spaces for your stair and elevators. Just throw those into your design for now for planning purposes. This program that I came up with, by the way, was from a hotels competition for the year 2050. So this is the exact competition program. And so that's basically where I got all these numbers from, and then also the fact that you have timeshare units and things like that. So start grouping those together and placing them and see what you come up with. And don't worry about, trimming all your walls when they meet the exterior. It's all about design and trying to figure out exactly if you can place all this stuff into your hotel and what square footage you're going to have left over eventually. Have a good weekend. Yep. I'll stick around for a little bit. Give me a start over. Give me a start over. What's going on?
That's what I'm
No,
So I actually did like certain files that I wanted to change like the mask. And I didn't want to mess with one on the floor.
Okay.
So I erased all my data, I recreated the ones that are